Welcome to the Wellspring Counseling Podcast. My name is Jonathan Kittle. I'm joined today by Adam Cowan. Good to have you here, Adam.
It's great to be here.
This is a conversation, this podcast is a conversation where counselors here at our practice talk about the problems that people face and different solutions that can bring help. Wellspring Counseling is a outpatient, private practice team of counselors, and we exist to be a source for emotional and relationship improvement. So we're thankful that you're joining us, that you're listening or watching.
Yes.
And Adam, thanks again for being here.
Absolutely.
Before we jump into the topic today, which I'm excited about, we're going to be talking about teens and the struggle to take ownership of their life and what parents can do. But before we get into all that good stuff, since this is your first time kind of joining us here, can you just tell us a little about who you are and how you got into the counseling world?
Yeah, I would love to. So I think my journey is a little bit non-traditional in the sense of, out of high school, I joined the military for a while. I wasn't quite ready to go to college, and then went back later and spent the bulk of my early 20s to early 30s in church work.
Okay.
And it was a really cool experience working with kids and teens and young adults. And it was actually at that time that I kind of got the draw to become a counselor. And I loved what I did in that realm. And I also realized that there were people coming into the church that had certain level of struggles that we weren't equipped to address. People that had maybe anxiety disorders or intense relationship strife or ADHD.
Yeah.
And so at that point, I felt really called to go back to school and pursue becoming a clinical mental health therapist.
Yeah. That's really, really neat.
Yeah.
It is often those moments where we're like, ooh, I don't have what I need right now, that kind of brings new direction. And so how long, you've been at Wellspring for a number of years now, 4 years, I believe.
Yeah, I think just at the beginning of September was the 4-year mark.
And talk a little bit about the kinds of clients you see and kind of your special areas of focus.
Yeah, so primarily, I would say probably 75% of my clients are children and adolescents, anywhere from the age of 7 to 18. And the most common issues that we work on together are emotional dysregulation, noncompliance with parents, family strife, some ADHD, anxiety, depression, identity, all that type of stuff that many teens are dealing with right now.
Right. Lots of familiar problems, common problems that teens are facing. Well, I appreciate you giving us a little introduction. We're certainly pumped that you're here. You're doing great work. And today we wanted to lean into this conversation around kind of the struggle that parents have to help their kids take responsibility. I know you were telling me that that's a frequent complaint, I think maybe you hear parents kind of giving, like, how do I get my kid to take more responsibility?
Absolutely, yeah. Very frequently, and this is accompanied by other issues as well, or other problems that they're dealing with. But something I hear quite common is a parent expressing frustration over the fact that their pre-adolescent or adolescent really cannot take ownership or responsibility for their mistakes or the things that they're supposed to do in life. And some examples would be, anything from homework and schoolwork to not doing their chores. And most parents are very understanding of the fact that kids and teens make mistakes.
But at our best moments, we are.
At our best, yes, absolutely. At our best moments, we are understanding. But I think the thing that they really struggle to understand, which I think triggers high levels of frustration, is why won't they just own that they didn't do what they were supposed to do?
So if they don't do what they're supposed to do, why can't they just acknowledge that?
Just acknowledge it.
Yeah.
And I think it's troubling for some parents because they fear that their teens are getting into this habit of lying.
Yeah.
And they project into the future and worry that, wow, if my teen doesn't learn how to just own their issues, they're going to be avoidant for their early adulthood.
Right. I remember us talking offline about how we'll hear parents wonder, is my teen a narcissist?
Yes.
Like, what's happening? Are they going to grow up and turn into a sociopath or something? Some of these big terms but it is hard when you have a kid that's maybe not done what they should have done, or they did something they weren't supposed to. Then you go to talk about it, and it feels like they won't acknowledge what happened.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
And often those situations lead to higher levels of conflict. And the cycle is not always the same, but somewhat predictable in the sense of a parent will confront the teen. Teen will become defensive, sometimes explosive or disrespectful. The parent matches that energy, and then on and on we go until everyone leaves angry.
Right. Sounds like a great go round. Well, tell us a little bit about why do you think kids struggle to take responsibility? Because as you're saying, we're both parents. Like it can be hard from the parental side of things. To like, I don't get it emotionally. Like that can be a tough place. So, what is it about teens and teen development? What makes that hard for kids to do that?
Yeah, I think there's a few primary reasons, and this wouldn't be an exhaustive list because every teen is a little bit different.
Sure.
And especially if the teen is experiencing maybe moderate levels of clinical anxiety or depression, it could be a little bit different. But generally, I think we have to frame it in the idea of where their development is.
Okay.
And for most teens, they're in this stage of strong identity development. And kind of their task is to solidify or to seek to solidify who they are.
That's where they're at kind of in their whole mental world of becoming a person. They're trying to figure out who they are.
They are.
Okay.
Yeah, and so through that journey, that lends to being a little bit more reactive, a little bit more guarded, and wanting, their own autonomy.
Okay. So talk some about that reactivity. What is it about, if they don't do something, what the parents ask them to do it, or again, maybe they did something they shouldn't do. What is it about the developing teen identity that kind of sets them up to be more reactive?
Yeah, I think that, some of the main things that all people are seeking, but especially in those teen years, like I said, are autonomy, to be separate from their parents. Kids grow up and they're very much part of a family. And as they move into the adolescent years, they, in a healthy normative way, they want to be seen as separate. So not as so-and-so's child anymore, but as their own individual person.
Their own person.
Yeah.
And that's a good thing. That's a healthy thing.
It is a good thing.
It's a normal thing.
It's a normal thing.
Okay.
And they seek independence, and they seek a certain level of power.
And that's like a kind of new thing for them, or that's just that's the phase of life where that part of development is front and center?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Front and center. I think we see glimpses of that even at an earlier age, pre-adolescence and in childhood. But that is the front and center thing. And that's why also, friends become in some ways more important than parents.
Gotcha. So when parents show up to call out a kid, but this kid is in this process of like, I want to be my own person. I want to be separate from you. That kind of loads up and charges up this interaction moment.
It does.
Yeah.
And then it can very much turn into a power struggle.
Okay.
And that's, we identify one of the goals of teen misbehavior is they want power. And so if a parent comes in and tries to hold them accountable, there's a natural struggle of them wanting to maintain their autonomy and power by avoiding owning up to, what they're being held accountable for.
Okay. I'm with you. I'm following. And just so we're all clear here, so the quest for autonomy, the quest for power is a legitimate thing?
It is.
Okay. Can you talk some about that? Because again, from the parenting perspective, maybe that's not always how we're seeing it. Like maybe we think they should just do what I say, or I'm still in charge.
Yes.
I'm still paying the bills. Why is it important for a kid to feel that, a teen to feel more power, more agency? Mm-hmm. Why is that like a thing that's important?
Well, and we'll probably hit on this more a little bit later in the talk, but I think, it's a big part of their self-worth, their self-esteem, to believe that they can do things on their own.
Right. Okay.
That there's a self-efficacy that's building and forming, and especially in the face of social anxiety, peer relationships, they want to seek to believe that they are able, that they are capable.
Okay.
And so, if you think about it in this way, a person who would feel powerless also feels that they are unable.
Right.
It is partly through the ability of feeling I can do this, that I have some form of power to change or to grow. And so there's an important aspect. And power is, I think, a hard word to use because it's generally seen as a negative thing sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah. I think most parents, again, come at it through that lens. We look at it that way. Mm-hmm. But this is helpful to hear. It's like a precondition to self-esteem. Mm-hmm. Is actually having some power, some ability to actually make a choice for yourself.
Yeah.
You're never going to get that byproduct of feeling good about yourself unless you are able to do something on your own.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And if we frame it this way, and this is an oversimplification, but if, the depths of depression is hopelessness or feeling powerless to change my life, the opposite end would be I feel like I have power to impact my life in a positive way.
Wow.
And if my parent busts in to strip my power away, I want to fight.
Yeah. That's really cool to contrast it with depression and that sense of helplessness, powerlessness. I can't, there's nothing I can do. And of course, no one wants their kid to kind of feel that way. Mm-mm. We also want them to do what we want them to do.
Yes.
But in that moment, emotionally, we lose sight of the bigger picture. So any other reasons developmentally or anything else, any other reasons why you think maybe, it's hard for kids to take ownership?
Yeah, I think two more maybe important reasons. Number one is simply that it can be scary. It can be scary. All humans have a hard time bearing with difficult emotion. Mm-hmm. And so when we are called out on something, our defenses tend to go up.
Right.
And, sometimes we feel senses of shame or guilt, and a natural human response to that is to protect myself. Yeah.
The call out just brings this sense of I'm wrong, or you think I'm wrong, maybe I am wrong. Mm-hmm. And then the instinct to protect and to buck against that.
Yeah, and if we frame this as adults in the workplace, if you're called out by a boss, you probably have a similar feeling.
Yeah.
Now, hopefully we're well-regulated and mature enough to recognize that the initial tinge of the discomfort, we can regulate it and accept. But teens typically aren't there yet.
Right. And I think if we're honest, we all have moments where we're not.
Yes.
Which is, it helps us have empathy for our children, our kids. To remember that. What was the other reason why you said there were two more?
Yeah, so I think the third reason is that sometimes it can work for them.
What do you mean?
So sometimes blame shifting or not taking responsibility, they find that because a parent doesn't always hold them accountable or follow up with it, that by blame shifting, they can get the parent off their back and to leave them alone.
Wow. Interesting. So just in that relationship kind of context or system, when a kid doesn't take responsibility, they blame, that is allowed to work, or somehow it's reinforced in a way that it becomes functional?
It does.
Okay.
It does. And sometimes I think all parents, myself included, are guilty of sometimes, shielding or rescuing our teens from something that would be a helpful experience.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And I'll give a small example.
Sure. That'd be great.
That, sometimes with school, a parent might, approach their teen and ask them, well, why isn't this homework done? Or why is there a grade in the grade book?
Yeah.
And of course, a natural teen response would be, my teacher hasn't put it in, or my teacher is unfair, or there's something wrong with my teacher.
Right.
That's the cycle of parent comes to confront, teen blame shifts.
Not my fault.
Not my fault. Now, to be fair, sometimes there is issue with teachers and other people involved in their life. So I'm not discounting that.
Right.
We just have to be careful not to, follow along that trail with them and I guess enable the blame shifting.
Oh, I see. So would that be like if I'm the parent, I'm like, now I'm hearing about the science teacher who's mean, and I'm kind of going with that, and yeah, maybe your science teacher does have a problem, and then the teen is supported in not taking responsibility.
Yeah, and that's an extremely tricky thing to navigate at times.
Yeah.
And, teens can tend to be good at manipulation at times, and parents want to believe, they want to trust,
Yeah.
and they want to support.
Yeah, of course.
And so it can be difficult to understand if it's working for them or not. But I think, we'll talk about in just a minute on how we can empower parents to help their child own the problem.
Yeah.
And part of that will come into play there.
Yeah. Well, that's actually a good segue. I mean, let's jump into that if you're cool with that.
It is.
Let's talk some about that. Yeah. What can parents do to help empower kids to take responsibility, to take ownership of their life? How do parents support them in that?
Well, I think the number one thing, maybe the most important thing, is for parents to embrace mistakes and consequences as really important learning opportunities.
Say more about that. What do you mean?
So again, as a parent,
mistakes and consequences?
Mistakes and consequences. Okay. So naturally, as a parent, one of our main jobs is to protect our children. And so we want to, at times, shield them from some form of consequence or keep them back from making a mistake.
Right. That's the protector part.
That's the protector part.
Right.
So, we see this all throughout the lifespan, and there's an aspect of it that is very good. A big part of it's very good. If your teen comes home and they're struggling in their homework, you want to check and make sure that they do well. But sometimes our best intentions can get away from us, and we can shield and protect them from making any mistakes or experiencing any natural consequences. And it is through them making the mistakes and experiencing consequences from other avenues of life that they can not only gain more self-efficacy, but also learn to own that problem.
So we just feel we love our kids and we don't want them to hurt.
Yes.
We don't want them to suffer. We don't want them to feel bad. But sometimes of course, we're not intending this, that if we step in and engage in like a overprotective way or something, like we just start protecting them.
Yeah.
We rob them.
That can very much be the case.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a fascinating way to think about it. What else? How else? So parents need to let consequences and let mistakes kind of do their thing. Let the kids kind of experience them.
Yeah.
And let the natural effect of that take root. What else can parents be doing?
So, and I think there is something to frame this in an important way is, we ask ourselves, who owns the problem, within our relationship with our teens. So there's going to be some problems that the teen can own, meaning that they take responsibility for it.
Okay.
There's going to be some problems that maybe the parent more owns, and others that are kind of a shared ownership.
Okay.
And to clarify on that a little bit is we want to allow our teen to own the problems that are developmentally appropriate, that, aren't going to cause future damage in the far future, that are not going to, risk safety or going to cause too much chaos in the home.
Okay. Let them own the things that are. Does that mean like let them own things that that they can handle, things that are developmentally appropriate,
Absolutely.
things that are not, you said, not going to cause too much problems or too much damage?
Yeah. Because going back to the role of protector as parents,
Yeah.
it is very much part of our job to protect them from certain things until they reach adulthood.
Mm-hmm.
But in that, again, in that, in that goal, we can tend to overprotect.
What are some examples of, what are some examples of, I don't know, problems that you hear about frequently that, generally speaking, they feel like those are teenage problems. Those are problems a teen can own.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe versus that's really, at least it's a shared problem, or maybe that's just a parent problem. Do you have anything come to mind?
Absolutely. So I think one of the biggest ones is schoolwork and grades,
Okay. Yeah. Tell us what you think.
or even getting to school. So again, this can be tricky because there are some situations where a student is doing very poorly, and that may become more of a shared parent problem.
Okay.
However, I think in, a moderate amount of situations, we see this cycle kicked up where the teen is not doing their work, or they're not getting the grades that have been agreed upon.
Mm-hmm.
And so, as parents, we want to help. We want to get on a grade book and constantly check. We want to start nagging. And that produces the opposite effect of what we want. Because I think this is one of the most important things in the crux of our talk, is that if we want our teens to take more ownership and responsibility, we have to allow them to. And we allow them to by not jumping in and taking control of the situation in times that they can.
If we jump in, get involved, and then the thing gets done, the accomplishment kind of happens. It didn't happen because they owned it.
Right.
It only happened because we jumped in.
Exactly.
Okay, that's making sense.
And if you think about it in, another way, if we have we'll use an example of a child who's learning how to make eggs for the first time. They're not going to do a great job.
Right.
If we jump in and do it for them, they will not gain ownership of the process.
Yeah, then we'll learn.
And one of the hardest things to do as a parent, but one of the most important things in helping your teen gain ownership, is letting them stumble through and figure it out without jumping into rescue or shield, because not only will they learn how to do it and take ownership, but they'll gain that self-esteem and confidence.
Yeah.
I think about my 8-year-old making eggs. When he makes his eggs and there's a mess everywhere,
Right.
he says they're the best eggs he's ever tasted. And
He's proud of them, right?
Yes.
Because they're his.
They're his.
Yeah.
Now, they may not, objectively be very good.
Right.
And I think that principle really comes into effect for all developmental stages, especially teens, is, when we talk about grades, they may be more proud and happy with, a low B or high C that they did on their own than an A that their parents nagged them and forced them to get.
Yeah. It makes a lot of
Which
sense.
is hard to hear, but
Yeah, it's convicting, but it's very sensible for sure. So what else can parents be doing in addition to give them the space, don't jump in too much, let their normal mistakes and consequences do its work. What are some other things?
Yeah, and before I add one or two, let me mention, because you asked the question.
Oh, yeah.
The example of maybe where a parent definitely should step in.
Yeah, thanks.
And so, one clear example would be if you find out that your teen is drinking and driving. That's not a natural consequence that they can deal with.
You don't want them to experience that natural consequences.
Yes. And so that's when logical consequences would come into play.
So what would logical consequences? What's the difference there between logical and natural?
So natural consequences are just something that are going to happen as the result of their action. Example being, they don't study for their test, they get a bad grade on a test. That's a natural consequence. And we want as much as possible to empower them to experience natural consequences.
Okay.
Because what can happen is if we jump in and try to be forceful, it shuts down their brain from the learning. because all they're focused on now is I'm mad at my parents and I don't want to do what they say and I'm in a power struggle, so I'm really not going to study now.
Okay. So let the natural consequences, let them have as much of those as we can to a point, though.
To a point.
Okay. And the drinking and driving is an example where I guess the natural consequence would be they get arrested, God forbid someone dies, right? There's a wreck. So what would a logical consequence be then?
So a logical consequence is, something that is related to the offense.
Okay.
And typically, it's time bound, it's reasonable, and for something like drinking and driving, it could be okay. You've lost the use of the car
Lost the car.
You lost the car, or the ability to go and socialize for a period of time.
Gotcha.
And I think that obviously the point of the consequences is learning. I'm not willing yet to allow you to experience the natural consequences of this, so I'm bringing in a teaching aid to help correct you and encourage you.
Yeah. Okay. That's helpful. That makes a lot of sense. How about some other things? What else can parents be doing to, help empower kids, take responsibility?
So I think another really important thing is to encourage them and be intentional about bringing in other important adults, key shareholders in their life, to also help them take ownership.
Tell us why. I mean, sounds good. What is it about that, other adults and other people?
So when they experience it, if we take, for example, a coach, a band director, a karate teacher, we could go on the list of other appropriate authority figures. They will hopefully hold them accountable and invite them to take ownership of their own actions.
Okay.
And it's beautiful because with the parent, it can be challenging because you're related, and when there's a more intimate relationship, it's more difficult.
Right. More opportunities for conflict.
Absolutely. And so, every teen is different. They have different interests, but to have something in their life where there is a positive, encouraging, but, firm adult authority figure that can empower them to also learn that can be extremely helpful.
Yeah, someone else kind of outside the family.
Yes.
But ultimately kind of helping kids develop the same things that parents are wanting, calling them up to responsibility.
Yeah.
Yeah, so bringing some others along. So that's really awesome. These are good. Tell me what you got more. What are some other?
I got
things?
one more, and I'll mention one thing on the key figures, whether it be a coach, a teacher.
That's great.
Is that as a parent, again, we want to do our best. Number one, not to undermine that other authority figure, because that is shielding. Once again,
it's another protective thing.
And there's limits, of course. If an authority figure is being overly harsh, that needs to be addressed.
Yeah.
If it seems reasonable and beneficial, then you want to let them experience what that consequence is.
Okay.
I think another element of that's really important is with the other authority figure is that not only do you not want to kind of shield them from that, but you want to take on what I would consider a consultant or curious mindset when they bring that home to you.
Yeah, talk to them about that. What does that kind of mindset sound like or look like?
Yeah, so it would be, the opposite of saying, I told you so, or they see the same thing that we see, but more of the spirit of, let's say your teen comes home and, the coach made us run forever because I was late to practice, or the coach said I cannot play in the next game because I haven't been coming to practice. We want to be curious, like, wow, I'm really sorry to hear that. That's really hard. I know you wanted to play in the game. Like, tell me more.
So just kind of reflecting or sharing, wow, okay, that must be tough. Versus like, I've told you got to get to practice.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because again, that becomes a blocker.
Yeah.
So,
now it's about you and your kid's relationship and y'all's energy.
Yes.
And not the teen and their behavior outside the home.
Absolutely.
It's not about their learning anymore.
Yeah, and oftentimes I see that it does indeed block them from the learning opportunity, because instead of processing the feelings that they're experiencing over not being able to play in the game, they're shifting now to being mad at mom and dad.
Yeah. As you talk about this, I'm noticing from a parent standpoint, our own emotions seem to be a big factor here, whether it's frustration, like in the last example, like I've told you got to get to practice, or you said a few times like our protector shield instinct, like seems like our own worry about our kids. Do you find that parents, their own emotional life is a big part of the process?
Absolutely. And I can speak of that from a clinical perspective and a personal perspective.
Okay.
Of how much our emotions, cloud our ability to do some of the stuff we're talking about. And again, very, very normative, very understandable, that we get fearful about our children.
Yeah. These are the people we love more than anyone.
Yeah. Any parent wants their child to have a lot of friends, a healthy social life, to be successful, to do well in school.
Yeah.
And if you frame it from an anxiety standpoint, I would say the fear of every parent is for their child to not only experience pain, but to in some way fail or perception of failure. Because not only do we want the best for them, but that's also can become a reflection upon us.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So we got to watch out for our own worries, our own nervousness,
Yes,
our own frustrations. And we have to make sure that we're tending to our own emotional world.
Absolutely.
And not just reacting.
Yes.
When we say it out loud, right, that sounds very reasonable.
It does.
But we also know emotions are powerful when we're in them.
They are.
It's hard to always have that perspective, but I appreciate you bringing that. Well, maybe in closing, tell us a little bit about if we're on this quest of helping our kids take ownership, helping them kind of become more responsible, which is hard, right? We're just talking about it's going to take us into dealing with our own emotional life. Make sure that we're not just, reacting and protecting in an overly protective way. What are the benefits of doing this? What have you seen in your actual experience? You help a lot of teens and a lot of parents.
Well, I think the number one thing that parents are seeing and seeking is an improved relationship with their teen.
Okay.
The less parents lecture, the less they nag, the less they allow their teen to take responsibility and ownership while holding them accountable, maintaining the curious and empathetic mindset, there's less reactivity naturally.
Right, because there's less negative energy coming in. There's less blame or less negative focus on the kid.
Yeah.
Which means that there's less stuff between us.
And I've seen it, time and time again, very anecdotally in my own work, is that the more the parent can back off, and that very much has to do with managing your own emotional world.
Yeah.
The more they can take a couple steps back, allow the teen to have more autonomy and to experience appropriate failure, the more often the teen then starts to come to the parent to ask for help.
Wow. Well, that's got to be, that's encouraging for me personally to hear, and I'm sure it's encouraging for parents. Because again, it seems counterintuitive sometimes to step back when someone you love so much is struggling or.
Yeah.
Okay. What else? What are some of the other cool things you see when this begins to happen and teens begin to get empowered? What do you see happening there?
Yeah. So I kind of mentioned this previously, but we tend to see a growth in self-esteem and self-confidence. Going back to kind of our egg example.
Right.
When a human being, and especially a teen, feels like they did something on their own and they were able to be responsible for it, it tends to build them up. We use that word a lot, empower.
Yeah.
We talked about power in the beginning. They feel empowered to do more.
Yeah.
If mom and dad is stepping in to rescue and shield, that intrinsically is telling them and sending them a message, you can't do this.
I remember, I think it was Love and Logic. They said responsible kids feel good about themselves.
That's exactly it.
Okay. Isn't it funny how empower, just the word, oh yeah, we want our kids to be empowered. But then if it's who's in power.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, I'm in power.
Yeah.
Why do they think they're in charge? How about some other things? Any other things that you see, like, as we begin to support our kids this way? Any other good results, kind of motivations to kind of keep moving in this direction as parents?
I think probably the final one that I wanted to mention is better communication.
Okay.
We hit on that a little bit. I think that's another theme that I hear, especially with teen boys. Their parents want them to communicate better about their feelings, about what's going on.
Yeah.
And again, if you think about it in this way, the more we give them space, the more they can find their voice to share. The more we're on top of them, the more they'll feel stifled and not want to share.
Yeah. Yeah, when the brain, sometimes it seems like it goes into hibernate mode for a few years.
Mm-hmm. It does.
And if we're just filling the void with questions and our talk and our energy.
Yeah.
Are you basically saying, like, we take up all the space?
We take up all the space.
And then they're even less motivated to share? Okay.
Well, and it's that natural desire of a parent to lecture.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying one of parents' jobs is to teach.
Of course.
I always encourage, don't try to teach in emotionally reactive moments. They're not going to hear. Pick your teaching moments, and in the more explosive moments, work on regulating and giving space. But with, I think, all people, but especially teens, less is more.
Less is more.
Less talk, more action, because at that point in time, they're probably not listening to a lot of it.
And teens are at the point where they've probably heard the lesson.
They have.
Before.
Yeah.
You've been with us a long time by that point.
Yeah, and the way that I kind of frame it in my work is, up until the teenage years, there is a lot of learning. There's still, of course, learning in the teenage years, but the teenage years is a lot of putting into practice, trying out what you've been taught.
Oh, okay, trying it out.
Yeah, they're trying on different personality traits. They're trying different interactions. And the beauty in allowing them to do that is they are learning what works and what doesn't work, who they want to be and who they don't want to be.
Yeah.
And so again, that role of identity versus role confusion, if they're given the space within a safe and reasonable way to try things out and make mistakes, they're learning who they want to really be. And oftentimes, that reflects who the parent wants them to be.
It's really cool. So don't step in too much and don't lecture too much. Let the consequences do the teaching.
Yes.
Okay.
And allow them to own the problems that they can own.
Yeah. Well, great conversation, great topic needed, how to help kids and to empower them so that they can own it, like you're just saying. Appreciate you sharing.
Absolutely. Thank you.
We will put some links in the description here so you can read about Adam, get to know him more on our website, and hope this was helpful to all of you listening. Thanks again, Adam, so much.
Thank you
for being here.